towards the 245 portion of our workshop, which is evaluation of batterer intervention programs in Kansas. Dr. John Gruby.
All right, thank you guys. Going to be talking about the domestic violence and batterer intervention in Kansas. I'm going to just do a really quick introduction, then I'm going to turn it over to Carmen Diaz, our senior research analyst. But I was also going to take the time to introduce Dr. Erica Lawrence. She is the director of translational science in the Family Institute and research professor at Northwestern University. Also, Kate Collison. Dr. Kate Collison, she's a clinical research psychologist, also with the Family Institute at Northwestern University. And she's also a Kansan, so I'm going to throw that out there.
Oh, wow.
So she's one of us. So, so just a quick background. I don't want to take up too much time, but Carmen and I, along with Peyton as well, we're looking into possible proactive approaches to address sentencing. Kansas, one of the things that we were looking into was domestic violence and the batterer intervention programs that we have. Research suggests that women who are victims of domestic violence are significantly more likely to end up in the criminal justice system. And also we were interested in the possible prevention aspects. If we can reduce future domestic violence, we could potentially directly reduce the number of domestic violence offenses for people in Kansas, but also the benefits of people living in a home that is free of domestic violence, the potential for children being more successful, being under less stress, and then also less likely to enter the adult facility. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Carmen Diaz, and she's going to give some more background info.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to start by giving us all some basic context about what batterers intervention currently looks like in Kansas. So in Kansas, courts are required to determine whether a domestic violence offense was committed.
Carmen,
If that determination
speak up, please.
If that determination is made, then the courts are required to tag those cases or to place the domestic violence designation on those cases and require those defendants to have what we call a domestic violence offender assessment completed. These assessments are meant to determine whether that person is appropriate for batterers intervention programming. So in Kansas, the Attorney General's office oversees BIP standards, provider training, and certification. And BIP is delivered by third-party providers to people on probation and by KDOC for people who are on parole or in a facility. We're told that right now there are about 35 third-party providers in Kansas. And at times it is a concern in certain areas of Kansas, especially about whether or not there are enough providers to meet people's needs. When someone is required to complete BIP, the program is required to last for a minimum of 24 weekly group sessions. Each of those sessions is supposed to be between 90 minutes and 2 hours. BIP stakeholders that we have spoken to have expressed concerns about the cost of BIP, both for providers who some of them have struggled to keep their doors open and to keep providing these services, but also from individuals who are required to take these programs because oftentimes we're told that they can't afford the fees to be in the program in the first place. Based on estimates we've received from BIP stakeholders, participants may be charged anywhere from about $500 to $1,300 for a 24-week class, and that 24 weeks is the minimum length. So on this slide, we have data from the Attorney General's office for fiscal year 2025. In the pie chart on the left, you can see that that green portion shows that a large majority of people assessed for BIP in that fiscal year were deemed appropriate for the program and then referred to BIP. On the right, what we're looking at is among the people that exited BIP in that same fiscal year, 72% of them completed treatment, and then almost 30% were not able to complete treatment, either because they dropped out or because they may have been terminated from the program. So the Attorney General's office does not require a specific curriculum for BIP programs. And so what that means is that there are several types of BIP programs being used in Kansas currently. The Family Peace Initiative is the most common curriculum, but there are also others that are being used. Something that we have learned is that neither the Kansas Sentencing Commission nor the Attorney General's office has any data on the results of these BIP assessments. So when the court is referring someone and saying, you have to have an assessment, we don't necessarily know what's happening afterwards. We don't know if that person was referred, if so, if they were able to enroll in BIP or if they were able to complete. And so that's kind of a black box for us on our end. There have been some prior local efforts, though, to examine the effectiveness of Kansas BIP programming. And these prior reports have shown some pretty positive and promising recidivism numbers. Authors of these studies, though, have also acknowledged that these haven't necessarily been in-depth research studies. Instead, they framed them as being more preliminary and have said that they would hope that it would encourage more in-depth research in the future. So we think it may be worth considering the possibility of a more in-depth, rigorous study to understand what's going on with BIP in Kansas, to understand the extent to which it may be effective, and if so, what we can do to support it. Simultaneously, as a research team, we know that there have been some recent rigorous studies conducted on another kind of BIP program that's referred to as ACTIVE, which our speakers are going to introduce to us today. ACTIVE is accumulating some high quality evidence that's shown that this particular programming and this particular curriculum is pretty effective. It's had a positive impact on, reducing recidivism in the jurisdictions where it's been implemented. And so that's why we reached out to Drs. Lawrence and Collison. They have, created and implemented this program in several states. So we invited them to share their experiences with the program. And we're just kind of hoping that it sparks a conversation about what we can do in our own Kansas context to support effective batterers intervention programming in Kansas. So with that, I will turn things over to Drs. Lawrence and Collison.
Do you guys have a screen to share on your end? Okay, you should be able to go ahead and do that now. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having us. What if we could cut domestic violence in Kansas from 1/3 to 1/2 of where it is right now? Would you be willing to look into that?
Yes.
What if we said that it would require you to be uncomfortable, to move out of your comfort zone in terms of what these programs look like? Maybe do some things that seem counter to what you have been doing all these years. Would you be willing to try it?
Yes.
Open ears.
As you all know, it was in the 1960s when women first finally stood up and said, domestic violence is not a private family matter, it's a crime. And we need to think about it as a crime and respond to it as a crime. We owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to these women for transforming how we think about and respond to domestic violence. Now, over the last 60 years across this country, we've generally embraced two approaches, what's known as the Duluth model and the cognitive behavioral model. I recognize that most, if not all of you, are already in this world, so please forgive me for oversimplifying for the sake of time. The Duluth model is based on the power and control wheel. And the idea is that men are violent towards women because they are trying to subjugate them, control them, exert power over them. The goal in that program is to change clients' views about women, about gender roles, about attitudes towards violence. The cognitive behavioral model focuses on the links among thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And in both approaches, we try to change those thoughts, those beliefs, with the goal of then reducing the violence. So we focus on changing the thoughts in order to change the behavior. Many of us would like to see these programs be more effective than they are. Given the amount of time and energy and money and person power we put into offering these groups, it would be great if we can improve their effectiveness. This can be hard to acknowledge or accept. It's uncomfortable. We've devoted our lives to offering these programs with the mission of reducing violence. And it's uncomfortable to sit with the fact that maybe we need to rethink what we're doing or revisit what we're doing. But I think there's a need for something different, for something profoundly different, either as a new approach or as an addition to the approach we're currently taking. I want to present another option that we refer to as active, achieving change through value-based behavior. In active, we help clients notice the internal experiences in that moment, their thoughts, feelings, urges, physical sensations, memories. We all have uncomfortable internal experiences. We all have feelings that are hard to sit with: shame, guilt, sadness, embarrassment, maybe anger or anxiety. We all have thoughts that are upsetting. Maybe they're thoughts about ourselves, that we're not good enough or we're a failure. Or we have thoughts about other people or about our country right now. They're painful. We all have physical sensations that accompany our feelings, such as anxiety or anger. And we all have memories that are distressing, maybe about trauma or loss, for example. So in these ways, we can connect with our clients. Our specific thoughts and feelings may be very different from theirs, but we all have internal experiences that are uncomfortable and hard to sit with. Likewise, we all engage in strategies to get away from or avoid these uncomfortable internal experiences. Some of us may distract ourselves by watching TV, listening to music, watching Netflix. Others by shopping or eating. Others by exercise, meditation. Some by drinking or drugs. There are a lot of different strategies that we all use in order to feel better in that moment. And again, this is a way that we can connect with our clients. Within active, we view violence in the moment as one way our clients are trying to get away from these uncomfortable internal experiences. So their strategies that they're engaging in are obviously quite different than the strategies I just discussed, but the function is the same. Violence is being used as a way to get away from either those uncomfortable internal experiences or an uncomfortable interaction, such as an argument with a partner. And sadly, the violence works, right? It's reinforced. If someone is violent toward their partner is likely going to stop. And so they get relief from the interaction and from the internal distress. The physiological sensations, the urge to be aggressive, the feelings of anger or anxiety, the thoughts they're having about their partner, they get immediate relief from all of that, so it's reinforced. And so next time, they're even more likely to engage in violence, and as we all know, probably engage in something more severe next time. Let me give you an example of how this plays out in the way we think about it within active. One of our clients is arguing with their partner. They experience waves of anger. Maybe their heart starts to race. Maybe they start to feel hot. Maybe they start to have thoughts about their partner. She's belittling me. She always does this. She's a blank. They might have the urge to be violent. The one option is to allow those internal experiences to inform their choices. They take that path, they become violent, which is then reinforced, and so they will do it next time. The alternative path that we teach in active is to notice those uncomfortable internal experiences and then identify their values as they relate to that situation. So perhaps they value freedom, staying out of jail or staying off probation. Perhaps they value being a role model to their children. Perhaps they value healthy relationships, even if they don't quite know what that means or what that looks like. We help them identify that value and then help them move toward that value, identify actions that are consistent with that value that help them move forward. Now, however, in order to choose that path, they must allow those internal uncomfortable experiences to be there. So there are two choices. Notice the internal experience, choose an action to get away from it and get relief, or choose an action that's consistent with what matters to you, what values are important to you, where you want your life to go. That means being willing to let those internal experiences be there also. We walk our clients through this and they practice it over and over and over. And they start to do it. They start to come into group talking about this sequence and how they're doing things differently. And it's amazing to see them spontaneously bringing this in, to see them talking about it. Because they want different lives, not because we're telling them they have to change. I've been doing active groups and training people in active for 15 years, and it still honestly takes my breath away every time I see it happen. So how is active different from existing programs? And I'm talking specifically about Duluth and CBT, not necessarily the Family Peace Initiative. I don't know enough to make the comparison there. One way it's different is that we are really focusing on helping clients develop an intrinsic motivation to change rather than an extrinsic motivation. We're identifying their values specific to them and then helping them identify choices that are consistent with those values. Relatedly, we individualize the program to each client. Their individual values, their individual thoughts and feelings, the choices there. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, which I think is one of the reasons it's been so effective. We also focus on the many factors we know lead to someone becoming violent or leading them to be violent in a given situation once they have a history of violence. We absolutely talk about power and control and sexist beliefs and gender roles. We absolutely talk about the links among thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. We also talk about family of origin, the intergenerational transmission of violence. We talk about the role of alcohol and drugs. We talk about traits such as insecurity, impulsivity, jealousy. So by doing that, again, we can really tailor it to each person because it's not a one-size-fits-all in terms of the contributors or the triggers for each person. And the final way I think it's different is that we see ourselves as in the boat with them. So again, we're not engaging in the same strategies. We're not having the same thoughts and feelings necessarily, but we all go through this process and we're there seeing them as whole people side by side, helping them move forward in ways that they're motivated to do themselves. As an aside, I also often get this question, so I'll just throw it out here now. It is absolutely trauma-informed and strengths-based. Everywhere we've implemented it so far, it's embedded in a CCR. Doesn't have to be, but that's how we've done it.
What is the acronym CCR and RNR?
Oh, sure. So most states do this within I'm going to blank on it. Community corrective. Kate, do you remember?
Coordinated community response.
Thank you. Coordinated. I knew you all would know. Coordinated community response, which, for example, Duluth was developed to be embedded within that framework. It's not just the intervention, it's the whole community response. And so that's how we've always implemented it. But again, depending on the state. And R&R is the risk need response framework for dealing with domestic violence. So my point is those are consistent across most programs in most states. So before I show you some of the effectiveness studies, and I want to tell you we are finishing up our 4th large-scale community effectiveness study. What does it mean to do an effectiveness study? What is considered best practice for truly testing whether a program is effective? One of the things that you need to do is compare it to another active program, another ongoing program. You can compare it to nothing, but what we've done is always compared it either to ongoing Duluth groups or CBT groups, or what occurs in most states, which is a hybrid of the two. And they're being facilitated by people who have been running them for years and believe passionately in them. So they're very devoted to them. They're not our people running the other groups. So having that comparison group, really raising the bar, making it harder to find something. It's important that clients be assigned randomly or quasi-randomly to a program. So you don't want to just take everybody who's here is doing active and everybody over in this agency is doing Duluth, and let's compare them because there might be other differences there. So ideally, you want clients to be randomly assigned to conditions or quasi-randomly, which means not based on which program you think they should get. Maybe it's based on availability or schedules or which group has an opening. You also have to make sure that in both cases, the facilitators are adhering to whatever the curriculum is and are highly competent, because you want to be able to say it's not because of how we've trained anybody, right? You have really good people doing really good work in both cases. Another best practice is making sure that the people who've developed it are not the ones running the groups, right? The people doing the research are separate, so that, because obviously we have a vested interest if we're running it. Any questionnaires or surveys you're using, you want to be reliable and valid, to have been tested, so we're not just making up the questions for that study. Pre and post tests, depending on what you're measuring, and including real world outcomes, such as the outcomes I'm sure you're all interested in, and certainly stakeholders are interested in. Can be recidivism, financial outcomes. We've done a cost effectiveness study comparing it to Duluth. And to, I think, Thinking for Change was the other one. And then also looking at victim reports, maybe perpetrator reports. So trying to get different kinds of outcomes. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of level set before I moved into these studies. As I said, we're finishing up our fourth one, funded by the Department of Justice. I'm going to show you a series of graphs that are going to go by slowly. I'm happy to share them later if you want, or go into more detail. But for all of these, I'll start there. The light purple, that's another group, Duluth or CBT. The dark purple is active. And in every single case, we've lowered recidivism by 1/3 to 1/2 the other condition. We've looked at charges, arrests, and convictions. We've looked at 1 year out. We've looked at 5 years out. Okay. We've looked at any violation as the outcome. We've looked at domestic violence only, and we've looked at violence convictions. We also have some self-reports in here that you'll see, and some victim reports. These differences hold up whether for completers and non-completers. In this one, it also includes controlling behaviors and stalking behaviors as reported by victims. We're finding these in open and closed groups, online and in-person groups, across racial groups, age groups, SES. We're finding this for clients in low, medium, and high risk scores in rural, suburban, and urban areas. The pattern is the same. And as I said, this is our fourth one, comparing it to what's considered the gold standard in most states. So let me tell you a little bit more about active and how we've been doing this. We've used it and tested it with men mostly, but also with female clients, with adolescents in juvenile detention, with college students found responsible for sexual misconduct. It's been used more broadly for anger management and delinquent behavior and sexual offenses. You can adapt part or all of it. The evaluations that we've done are using the entire curriculum, to be clear. It is typically a 24 session, 90 minutes, because that's what most states that we've worked in require. But it can certainly be adapted. And we have adapted the length depending on different places' needs. As I said, you can be open or closed, in person or Zoom. We've also done this individually and in group format. Where do we have active so far? So I want to start with Iowa and Minnesota. As I said, Iowa was the first state. That's where I was when we developed it. And we did that first effectiveness study was statewide, where Duluth and CBT groups were already being run. And after the results of that study, and they saw that the results that you saw, the state completely switched over. We're the first state in the country that's using a statewide empirically supported intervention, and they're still using it. Minnesota is the other place where it is widely used. Certainly in the Twin Cities, they're using it, and there are a lot of other rural counties that have been starting to use it that we've been training. All of the other states there either are using it, different counties or districts in those states are using it, or we're in the process of training them to use it. And then finally, it's in Bogota, and we've been in talks with Estonia and parts of the UK. It's being used in community-based corrections mostly, but also in jails. And by people in corrections, mostly probation officers, but then also we've implemented it in partnership with DV agencies themselves or mental health agencies that are offering these kinds of services. So let me talk a little bit about what the training looks like, in case you're interested. That's often a question. There are two parts to it. The first part is roughly 20 hours. We're going to be doing one online soon. We're trying to do part ones online because it's easier for more places. And that really gets you a feel for what it is and how we do this and how we work with clients. Part two is really for agencies that want to implement active. And I realize that's not where all of you are. I'm just trying to give you the whole picture here. There's another about 8 hours of training. You get all the manuals and the workbooks, and we pair you with a coach the whole first time through that you're running a group because it is quite different. And they would be with you and help you all the way through. And then obviously any support you needed beyond that. Finally, it is a train the trainer model, which means that our goal is to train you, get you comfortable with the intervention, and then train a couple of you so that you can do your own training and coaching and do it yourself in-house. We're happy to be a support anytime you need it, but we want it to be self-sustaining within agencies that want to set it up that way. So we'd be honored to talk to anybody who would like to learn more about active, learn what your needs are, help you determine whether this is something you want to learn more about, either in full or in part. I think the biggest challenge is to decide whether you're willing to feel uncomfortable, try something that feels uncomfortable, or that feels counter to the way groups have been run in Kansas. Are you willing to be skeptical and uncomfortable in service of reducing domestic violence by 1/3 to 1/2? Now, please, what else would you like to know?
Ms. Weigand.
I have a few questions. Do you have to have certain credentials to teach the program?
Do you have to have certain? No, absolutely not. In fact, one of the things we're so proud of is that it's intended for paraprofessionals.
Okay.
So as I said, we've been teaching probation officers. We can, do not have to have any particular training.
And that one of the things I have issue with our current BIP program is if a client misses one of the classes, then they have to start over, which is really counterproductive. So is there any rule related to that attendance? Like if you have to start over or what happens exactly?
It's a great question. I hadn't heard of that. I have two answers to you. One is that wherever we go, we work within your system and your rules. So I don't feel like it's my place to come in and say, this is how you should determine attendance and all that. Having said that, one thing that's really nice about active when we tested it in open groups is that as long as somebody got 24 sessions, it didn't really matter where they started. We found those dramatic differences. So some places we work with people, if you skip it, that's okay. We set it up that there's certain entry points. Sometimes we'll recommend that the facilitators, spend 15, 20 minutes before the next one to kind of orient them. And again, that depends on how you work with your facilitators. But no, I would never say, I guess I hadn't heard that before, that if you miss one, you have to start over. I've heard if you miss 3 or more than 3.
It might be more than that, but it's just, there's lots of reasons clients miss appointments. And so it ideally be nice if they could stay in the class and kind of get back on track.
I agree. I think we've tried to encourage facilitators or agencies we've worked with to actually sit down with the person, and certainly not if it's one, but if they've missed several, what's going on? Let's figure this out. And often that person then comes in and they're much more involved, and it can work really well rather than just kind of kicking them out.
So go ahead. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Then I wanted to understand the group structure. Do you can it be males and females together? Do you prefer teens by themselves and adults by themselves, or how does that structure look?
We've always separated it. So
Okay.
there are men's groups, mostly men's groups. We've done it with women's groups themselves. We haven't divided up by who the partner is, if you will, although I know there are some places in Kansas that are doing that. I think one of the few states that's doing that, actually. Adolescents, we did adolescents themselves, and we did it for 11 to 13 or 14 to 17. We even, split up those age groups.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
So I'm a bit confused. So you indicate that active is not one size fits all, that it's an individual, but yet you're talking about groups. How do you do that? How do you have an individual session inside a group session? And these are, you are doing online digital appearances, or are they all in person?
We've done both. We started off in person in COVID. Obviously, some places did online, so it depends on the location.
What about the group session compared to the individual? How does that work?
Sure. So the individual sessions is, let me talk about the group session, because I think that was the first part of your question. And Kate, please jump in if you have more to add there. I think it's a great question. And part of, I think what's different is that a lot of it is experiential and discussion based. We're not just reading a script or lecturing at them. And so when we're talking about values, we're asking each of them, we're helping each of them identify their values. And so I might have a conversation with you about your values and then move over to somebody else will have different values. Or we're talking about how to notice your internal thoughts and feelings that are uncomfortable, and those are going to be different for each person. We have a session where we explicitly talk about contributors and triggers to violence, and we go through these different categories I mentioned. And the idea is that each man is filling out their own form at the time, identifying their own contributors and triggers, and which are, when we get to the end, which are the ones they have control over and not control over, which are the ones they can change or not change, but those specifics are different. So that's one way I would say we're really able to tailor it. It's not, we're only talking about this tonight and it relates to all of you. Kate, let me let you see if you have anything to add there.
Sure. Yeah, I think I actually just got out of a coaching. I coached an active group this morning, so it's fresh in my mind. And I think that kind of to Erica's point, mostly we're talking about running this in a group format, but the content is meant to be I think we kind of talk about things at a process level, like let's talk about values. But for each person in the group, we have some time for personal reflection. We have time for them to sort of explore and identify their own values and sort of share, here are the values that are guiding my behaviors this week, or here's what I had in mind when I did this. And so I think when we say individualized, it's individualized within a group setting, because necessarily, I think logistically, most agencies we work with just tend to run these programs in groups. And so we kind of do that to fit within the agencies we work with. But as much as we can within that group setting, we try and individualize. That said, we also coach facilitators or probation officers, whoever it is we're working with, for how to use these skills with individual clients. So I would say we do sort of have that as an option, but just most of the places we work in just offer the curriculum in a group setting.
So on a very nuts and bolt level, give me the difference between an active class and a Duluth model class.
Okay. Again, if you run Duluth groups, I'm oversimplifying, I acknowledge that, although I did run Duluth and CBT groups for about a decade before this. Duluth groups are much more lecture-based and much more focused on the power and control wheel. Each session So when I ran the board, linked to the power and control wheel and different behaviors. So let's talk about physical violence and how that links to the power and control wheel. Let's talk about emotional violence today, how that links. And so it's always brought to that historically, and that may not be the case in Kansas right now, but historically Duluth groups were very confrontational. Say you're a batterer. Come in the first night and tell everybody what you did wrong. Say you're a batterer and you're not going to graduate. Again, lots of places have softened that, but that's the traditional, and lots of places haven't. It feels a little more us versus them and a little more extrinsic motivation to change. We are focusing, and the focus there also is on change these thoughts in order to change the violence. Change your thoughts about women, change your thoughts about gender roles. I don't like a lot of what they say, but the research shows over and over again that changing those thoughts first of all, it's very hard to do, but it's not reducing violence. And so we take a different strategy in which we're focusing specifically on the behaviors. Notice your thoughts and feelings. I may not like the things they say. I would say I get hooked at least once a month by something one of the guys says in group, but challenging them and confronting them doesn't reduce the violence. And to me, that's where the action is. Am I reducing the violence? If I'm not, I may be really upset, but I can sit with that because what my value is to reduce the violence. So I think that's the biggest difference. Kate, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I'll just say, and I have less experience with other types of programming, and most of my experience is with active. But I guess like from talking with some of the other BIP providers that we've networked, or kind of talked with in Chicago area at least, as Erica mentioned, it's very didactic. It's also very focused on the situation, the incident that led them to the group. So it's in that sense, it's a lot of recounting what led to their usually arrest if we're working with court mandated folks, what it is that led them here, and really focused on an event, a singular event or a pattern of events that landed them here. Active tends to be a lot more here and now in this moment, what's coming up for you. And we don't necessarily, we might go an entire session where we're not necessarily talking specifically about domestic violence, but we are talking about, are you feeling the urge to get rid of a feeling? Are you feeling the urge to control a feeling? And let's kind of walk through some experiential exercises. Let's use metaphors. Let's use activities to try and actually practice what it feels like to sit with emotions in a different way. So I would say that's the only other difference I wanted to highlight, was just really, we don't focus a lot on the specific event that brought them here. We sort of see it as that's water under the, like that happened and now we're here, and let's focus on what we can control now in the present and moving forward.
Thank you, Kate. I think just to build on that, we talk about any violent instances they've engaged in, not just the one that landed them in group, but we talk across relationships, not just that one relationship. So I think we talk about it more broadly.
Another question, I didn't hear you talk about an assessment component. Do you have to have an assessment to participate?
So within assessment, again, I've tried to partner with agencies. And so every agency we've worked with has their own assessment process. Most places you just do a risk assessment, the LCSMI, or I think there are a couple others that some states are using. And so I have not interfered with that. I've kind of deferred to how they run their system there. That's usually more at the government level or system level. And then they're coming up with a low, medium, or high risk. And as I said, so we've broken down our data looking at low, medium, and high risk. But other than that, we have not stepped into that. We've deferred. We can certainly do that, but we've deferred to whatever system each agency is working in.
Thank you.
Of course.
Judge Donovan?
What is your ideal number for when you do these in a group setting?
I would say 10 to 15 is my ideal number. Now, having said that, I've seen them as small as 5, which I think is a little too small. I've seen them as big as 25 in urban centers, which I think is too much. But we've definitely made it work however we need to, but I would say 10 to 15 is a great size.
Dr. John Gruby?
Could you speak a little bit to the costs associated with active?
Absolutely. So the part 1, as I mentioned, which but I think a lot of people take that because they're starting to implement it or they want to get a little more sense of what it is. We're actually changing our cost model right now, which I think will be better for agencies, better for states. It's about $1,000 a person for that, and that's about 20 hours of training. And say anywhere from maybe 1,500 to 1,000 to 2,000, depending on how many people, how long it is, things like that. And then the part 2, which is where we would really take you through the manual. You would get the manuals and the workbooks, and we would take you through exactly what these sessions look like and how to do them. And then we pair you with a coach and all of that. I think we're thinking it'll be 2,000 to 4,000. And remember, the coaching is for 24 weeks, and they're watching the groups and they're meeting with you. So it's about 3 hours a week for a coach over at least 24 weeks. So, and then having said that, some of it depends on the county or the district or the agency and what their finances are these days. So
Is there a cost associated with the offender? Like, what's the offender cost?
that, again, I defer to how you run things. I will say in Ramsey County, so in Minnesota, the groups that are run by corrections, they offer them for free. The agencies they contract with charge. In Iowa, they charge. So that I'm a flat rate. So however you do it is however you do it. And then I'll work within your system.
Is there a workbook cost?
Yeah, so we build that into part 2. So there are the workbooks for all the clients and manuals for facilitators and all the coaching and the training.
I'll also add to that. So we are working on a cost effectiveness study right now. So it'll be hopefully hot off the presses in a few months. But what I will say is that when we've kind of looked at the landscape of other programming, again, I'm not as familiar with Family Peace Initiative or some of the programs in Kansas, but certainly the ones we've looked at in Illinois and Minnesota. What we generally find is that, so obviously, any program is going to come with some sort of training and then some sort of materials cost, right? Typically after that, there's some sort of maybe like copyright cost or like, using the materials year after year. Active is on the front end, can be within the first year, have a higher cost in terms of coaching, because coaching is sort of it's something that we think can be incredibly helpful and valuable for supporting first-time facilitators. Our hope is also that with coaching, we're really helping to establish that train the trainer model so that an organization feels like they have enough kind of support and training up front that they can just sort of take it and run with it and not have to pay for any additional trainings or anything like that moving forward. And so what I will say is that the coaching is maybe an added component compared to other programs. However, what we have also found with this cost effectiveness study we're doing is that in the long run, in terms of reduced recidivism, reduced court costs that are associated with arrests and with prison time, it does end up being much more cost effective when you start to look at the 3 and 5 year mark. And also, as Erica mentioned, we've been changing our training model and cost model so that it actually is less upfront cost as well to begin with. So we've kind of taken that cost effectiveness study and tried to figure out how can we tweak it to make it even more cost effective in the short term as well. So our hope is that the new training model makes it a little bit more comparable to other programs when we're including that coaching component.
That's a good question.
Please.
I'm sorry, I'm new to this whole process, so I'm trying to understand what it is we're actually doing here. So I've heard research comparing one model to another model, but now I'm hearing almost a pitch for a certain model, having compared 2 models and being done by the same people. So I guess my question is, I've heard several times Family Peace Initiative. What are we doing here? Are we trying to figure out what the best model is for us, or are we interviewing different models? And if so, why aren't we hearing from some of the others? I'm just curious what we're doing here. Help me understand.
I would love to speak to that if I could. I'm Mary Stafford. I'm the Director of Victim Services for the Kansas Department of Corrections. We oversee a battery intervention program that serves a large population of domestic violence perpetrators in Kansas. So we're incredibly fortunate in Kansas to have the Family Peace Initiative, which actually was founded by Steve and Dorothy Halley, who I believe are on the call, that mirrors essentially all the elements we're talking about in active. The personal introspection, the accountability, the humanistic approach to working with folks who have committed some of these offenses. They also provide the technical assistance. They are very much they're essentially all of the great things you're hearing about active. Family Peace Initiative is doing that in Kansas. Also, we're not paid by Family Peace Initiative. We have seen ourselves that this model works for us. Our most recent recidivism data shows that 85% of the people who complete this program with us in KDOC do not have another domestic violence arrest or protection order filed against them within 3 years of completing the program. It works. My question, I certainly cannot speak to all of the BIP providers in Kansas. I don't know anyone doing Duluth model in Kansas. And so that's a little bit of my question of where is this coming from? We have a lot of really incredible things happening in Kansas, and by all means, let's talk about it and get folks excited because it works. What I'm unclear about is the comparison about active versus Duluth model, and I'm not sure that anyone here is doing Duluth model.
And just, and I think just because that's what their research, that's why they're comparing it. When we were speaking to the Attorney General's office, they had said there is an extreme shortage of providers throughout the state. They're just flat out not enough. Whatever type of provider, whether it's Family Peace Initiative, whether it's Duluth, whether it's CBT, I'm sure I'm not listing all of them correctly. So this is just an opportunity. They have done a lot of extensive published research that shows that active is effective. Not saying at all that Family Peace Initiative is not effective. This is just an opportunity to have looking at potentially another useful BIP model that could potentially bring in more providers, because just flat out, we don't have enough. Also, I mean, it's a little bit different, and I wanted to move into that. I know we're running out of time. One of the biggest issues that we've run into when we were doing our discussions is cost. I don't know that Family Peace Initiative or any of the other providers maybe have control over this because I don't know how the control structures work. But for us as a commission, we just have people, 85% of our felony caseload, and I'm sure this is probably similar on the misdemeanor caseload as well, are meeting some level of indigency. So they're already struggling to make ends meet. And then we're saying do batterer's intervention, and we're adding one more likely highly stressful situation of having them pay additional money. So, what's helpful for stress? More bills. So just as a commission, getting some potential discussion there, because that is a major hurdle. We do Senate Bill 123, state-funded drug treatment. I think that something would be helpful for batterer's intervention. This because, just like we don't want people to be addicted to drugs, we also do not want people to be committing domestic violence in the home, and for all of the other reasons that we already listed about future female offending, future juveniles in the home might be more likely to offend, that sort of thing. So not coming in with any idea of saying like FBI bad, active good. This is one more potential thing to get more providers around that has been rigorously tested. And then I do think, since we're kind of short on time, if we want to potentially transition into some of the cost issues that Carmen and I spoke to a lot of people in the field, whether it's attorneys, providers, CSOs, you name it. I think every single person brought up the fact that costs are a major problem to completion, and completion would show if you complete the program, you're less likely to commit. So I think it's something that we need to potentially look at or discuss.
So a couple of things. One, I'm struck, I'm glad you said that, because this reminds me an awful lot of the community correction cognitive behavior that we have in our district on how they deal with people on community corrections and the steps and the classes they give them, the accountability, the talking about the individual. This is strikingly similar. The second is, I would love to know what programs are being taught in the Peace Initiative. I'm familiar with my area and I'm very comfortable. I'm a big believer in this. I think this, in my years on the bench, this has been one of the most effective programs in domestic violence that I've seen. I've had more feedback from defendants that have come back to me and said, thank you for sending me to that class. It's been unbelievable that by law, far and away, that area, that niche has been more responsive. So I would love to know what other programs are being taught, because if the Attorney General's responsibility is to look at that, then it would seem to me that they would have, if there's only 35 presiders, that would be an easy task to determine who's providing what, because if somebody's not providing something along the lines of Peace Initiative or active, would you tell me, or similar, then they sure sound like they ought to be doing. So I would love to have that account.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. I wasn't being critical. I was just curious what we were doing. I'm a little bit confused by the research component being presented by the same group that is presenting a model.
Let's led to some good discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad.
And that's partially my fault. I could have let off better to give us, I just was concerned with time, and then cost us more time in the long run. So, but anyway, I don't know if anybody now wants to get back to the cost idea that we could potentially, because that cost is preventing people from getting a program completed. Maybe that's something we want to consider. Yeah.
So I have a question, because cost is a huge barrier. I have many clients who can't make it through the program. They do 20 weeks and then get kicked out because they can't continue to pay. And so I think a program's only effective if you complete it. And what I'm really interested in is, like, what will the cost look like with the train the trainer component? If it can be turned over, if we can train community corrections people and court services people, or probation can actually do a program. Is there an ongoing cost to the program once you have done the initial training and trained the initial coaches? And are they able to just teach new people and continue on with the program? Is there licensing costs or other things?
Sure. And I guess if I could back up a second, I was asked to present the research to you, which is why I was presenting it. So I'm sorry if that caused confusion. There will be, again, like, as I said, we're trying to change this model to reduce the costs for agencies up front. And so likely we're going to move into the model that several of the other programs are using, which is, let's say, every 2 years, there's a contract to continue using the manuals and the workbooks. And that seems to be typically how people are doing things. And so we're moving to that. It is copyrighted and licensed. I will also say that we are not the only ones who ran those studies. As I mentioned, for best practice, you want other people doing studies that the developers aren't part of. And we're not a business. I don't know if that got clear. We don't have an LLC. We're not a business. I'm a professor at Northwestern, as is Kate, and we have conversations about what's affordable and make it work. As long as my team is paid for their time, I'm not making any money off of it. So I'm just listening to the conversation. I thought that might clarify kind of where we're coming from.
But the cost to the individuals,
That's up to you. How much you want to charge them.
KDOC, what's the cost in the class?
Well, we don't charge.
There you go.
I think when you have staff
It's
who's
the
paid
private
for by the
providers.
agency.
Right.
It's the private providers that are expensive.
Yeah, because they can't pay their staff otherwise. And I love the way you're talking about it.
Right. So what are people here, and what's it cost in the class? I hear
It's like $25 minimum, I think.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say that I think there's two different providers that my folks have used. One is 25 and one is 40 per class.
Yeah.
And sometimes DOC can provide grants.
Plus, there's the money for the assessment up front, like
Yes.
There's
Pay
a
for the
$200
assessment, pay every
$250
week.
assessment.
If you aren't able to pay, then you don't get to complete the
And when
program.
they're on probation, there's no grants or anything on those.
And all of our sentencing data would suggest, what, 75+% of our DP cases are getting probation. They're not going to prison, so they're in on their own.
And the majority of DV cases are misdemeanors.
That's true. So they wouldn't go to prison even on a revocation.
And right now, most of those classes are being done virtually. There's almost nothing in person right now. That I know of.
But is there a booklet cost to the individual taking the class? I mean, what is the per booklet?
I'd have to look at the cost effectiveness study, but that part 2 would include a set of workbooks for your first group and the manuals for the facilitators. You can always get additional workbooks. I think the workbooks are, how much are they per person?
I was just, it's whatever, truthfully, we just, it's whatever FedEx printing costs to print it. And then we just send the bill. So I think it's usually, because the participant workbook is maybe 36 pages, I think it ends up being maybe like $40 per manual with the binding. And then the facilitator manual, I think, is more like $250 because it's a chunk. So, but it's whatever, that's kind of what we base it off of. I just don't have those numbers off the top of my head. I haven't ordered them in a bit.
Yeah. But there are ways to, and again, most places have asked us to copy and bind them and send them to them, but
oh, sure.
There are cheaper ways to do that if you print it out and then staple it, or, however you want to do it.
Have you found in your research the effectiveness being different from in-person versus virtual meetings?
It is not different so far, which is amazing.
Same question, you guys.
So we actually are looking at that right now because we went virtual in 2020 and we do have quite a few of our groups are back in person. We did find that continuing to offer some remote will probably always be the best solution for our participants. I am in the middle of a recidivism study right now, actually with some of those folks who were serving during COVID. Right now, it looks to be pretty comparable.
Any other questions? All right, well, very good. Director Lawrence and Dr. Question? Please.
Is it okay for me to ask a question? I'm not sure exactly what my role is here. But, Kate and Eric, it's a pleasure to meet you. And we've been reading your research, and I'm really excited about the road that you're on. It is so in line with where we have been going, and I want to have more conversations. One of the things that stood out, though, that I'd like you to talk to about is the completion rate in some of the studies was really pretty low. And I was wondering if you've been working to address that, and why do you think it came out so low, and what's the answer to that from your perspective?
Yeah, I appreciate your saying that. We heard a talk about from someone who runs family peace initiative groups, or did when they were in Kansas. And so we're sort of the rising tide lifts all boats kind of. And so if everybody, if you're trying something new, we're trying something new, and, let's join forces and all that. The completion rates across the board, when you're just collapsing across everybody, are staying at about the 50% national rate and across those. So I'll acknowledge that we've found 2 things, though, that I think are interesting, and I want to look into more before I, share them widely. One is that we found, when we broke it up, that we are getting higher completion rates for African Americans compared to the existing groups, and higher completions for clients who have not completed high school. The other thing is that we're finding that even for folks who don't complete, we're reducing recidivism by 1/3 to 1/2. So that 1/3 to 1/2 depends on whether they complete or not on average. But yes, I think trying to figure out how can we get them to complete. That's one of the reasons we say sit down and talk to them, find out what's going on, those kinds of things. So I agree. I think that's something to continue.
So
but it doesn't seem to be impacting.
The national completion rate is 50%?
Yep.
And am I correct that Kansas, you said 72?
So with talking with the Attorney General's office, they did not necessarily have data to calculate a completion rate. We did sort of an alternative in our slides to show of people that exited, but we don't necessarily they don't track people.
Okay.
So
I will be totally transparent. Ours is not very high. Ours is probably closer to 40 to 50%.
Okay,
The reason being, it's an intensive program.
right,
The folks who are not ready to make the introspective change are not completing.
all right. So
Most of their
that's good
sentences
information.
end
Thank
before their
you.
classes.
Thank you.
No, so Danielle, will you talk about our absence policy?
Sure, I'm sorry. So I think a couple of barriers that we experience when it comes to completion rates. So one of the biggest one is their sentencing. And so oftentimes the people that get prioritized into our groups are sentenced to 1 year post-release, eligible to earn 6 months of good time. And by standards in Kansas, it's a minimum 6 months long of group. And so we're all automatically at a barrier because they don't have enough time to complete the program if they earn all of their good time. And the way that parole works is that it cannot be extended like it can on probation or community corrections. Once their parole ends, it ends. And so we try to rely on collaborative relationships with parole officers where there are behaviors that are occurring either because of BIP or other areas of their supervision, if they're able to lose loss of good time, so we have more time to serve them, that kind of thing. But oftentimes we cannot complete everyone that comes into our groups because they don't have enough time left on parole in order to do and complete our group that's a minimum of 6 months long. We've also found for parolees that it takes anywhere from 9 to 12 months for them to actually complete the program because of all the other barriers that they're experiencing outside of BIP. BIP is one responsibility that they have in addition to getting a job and substance abuse treatment and mental health treatment and having a family and having kids and struggling with addiction or whatever it is. And so there are a lot of barriers that they experience outside of BIP that also contribute to it taking longer for them to complete the program. When it comes to our attendance policy, specifically for KDOC VIP, we allow them to have 2 absences. And if they exceed their absences, they go back in credit. So they're not automatically discharged from the program. So they either go back to week 3, week 10, or week 18 of the program, depending on where they were when they got that 3rd absence. And so we also have a couple of reasons why someone would be excused from group. So like a funeral, if them or their family member is hospitalized, or if they're sick, we have reasons for them to be excused. But if they're just skipping group to skip group, because they don't want to be there, that's counting as one of their absences. And so, we've had people who've been in our groups for 2 years, and eventually they complete, but attendance has been, something that's kept them in the group longer. Part of BIP in Kansas per the standards is we have to have that accountability component. And so if we have someone who's not showing up to group and we're trying to work with them and we're having conversations with them and their parole officers, and they're just saying, I'm not interested, I'm not coming. At some point, we're going to be holding that accountability, barrier of, you have to be here. And if you're not going to be here, then we're going to discharge so that we can put someone in the room who is willing to be here. And so we try to avoid discharge as much as we can. And even though our program and our staff are funded through the state general fund, we still can't serve all the people that are referred to us. There are a lot of people that get referred to us that we cannot serve because we only have 6 full-time staff, and we operate out of 4 parole offices and 1 prison. And so there are a lot of people we just can't serve that need to be served, and we don't have the funding to increase our staff, to increase our capacity. We would love to. So if we could get some more money for more staff, we'd love to expand our program, but we can't because we only have so much capacity.
Director Schultz.
So I'm thinking about this holistically, and I'm trying to understand that last year the legislature passed a bill that took the discretion away from the court as to mandatory imposition of Batterer's intervention program. So it actually expanded the reach of how many actually would have to actually be involved or participate. We're saying that the national average is 50% completion for this. If this is a term and condition of my supervision on probation, we have 35 providers throughout the state. Elliot, how many 123 providers do we have?
60 agencies with 100
we have 6
locations.
We have 60, and we feel like we need to continue to recruit. So 35 locations throughout the entire state, Some of those offenders, I presume, would have to travel several counties to actually seek treatment. So there's another barrier. They're having to pay $25 to $40 in addition to all their court costs, restitution, everything else. I presume that at the plea agreement stage, we are trying to plead away from that because we don't want our offender going to or our client to go to batterer's intervention for that very reason. And so, but at the same time, we all understand that this could be an effective treatment for this particular individual. So I struggle with that. If we only had somebody on an advisory committee with the Attorney General's office that could actually speak to this. Who could that be, I wonder? I don't, Spence, what do you guys do as far as having, if that's a term and condition of supervision, is that being enforced and are they getting revoked because of it?
Yeah, obviously we give every opportunity for them to attend. If they just won't attend, yeah, it's a condition of probation and they're not doing that condition, then they go back to court on revocation.
It just seems like we're setting them up for failure. Now, I'm not giving, I'm not, certainly endorsing folks that are not want to be compliant, but at the same time, if you're trying to continue that job and the physical, and which I think, we found that out during COVID as well, changing SB 123 to telemed codes and everything else to actually do that helped because, I could actually do that treatment from my location. It's a much easier type of setting. And so it can be done. It is possible to be able to do it, but if a provider's requiring you to be in person, that certainly could be very problematic, I would think.
Questions? Any discussion?
Dorothy had a question and Erica. Dorothy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Can you
go
hear
ahead.
me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, first off, I just want to say to Erica and Kate that I want to congratulate you on all of your work. I think that there are programs out there like the Family Peace Initiative who have also developed an innovative approach and have really gone away from the we them, have gone away from and really focused on developing a trauma-focused approach that is focused on an internal focused dialogue. And so I just want to say that I appreciate that you have gotten this research done. I think that is very affirming for programs like us. And I was wondering, have you done comparative studies with other innovative programming or only with Duluth or CBT programs? I have that question. And then the other question is that when I was looking at some of the research, I noticed that, as you said in your presentation, that in many ways there was a not surprising positive comparison of active versus Duluth CBT. But in looking at your randomized clinical trial research, I noticed that men assigned to active did not evidence lower rates of DV recidivism, but they did in the other studies. And I was wondering if you had an answer for that.
Sure. Your first question was how we compared it to some of the newer ways that, and yes, there are some colleagues that are and friends that are doing some really innovative things in different places. We haven't yet. We've tried to. We've partnered with other agencies that we think are really taking more of a strength-based approach or trauma-informed or adding in some of these other components. And we said, let's also gather results for you. Again, it's not one or the other, but if there are a number of places doing new things, let's show that all of those are working well. We haven't had the opportunity to follow through and get them the results for whatever reason. I don't know if they fear that it's a comparison. And so to me, that would be ideal. I don't think it's about one or the other. I think it's about this movement to bring some new innovative ways, and let's show that all of, or maybe some of these, maybe not all of them, but there are a number of places that are doing new things that are really working. And so let's join forces. So that would be my fantasy, personally. But we have tried, I will say. So we'll talk. Your other question was, forgive me. Okay, were you going to jump in?
My other question was about when
the rates.
You all are doing so amazing in getting the research, and I noticed that the clinical, the randomized clinical trial really took care of a lot of the limitations of some of your earlier research. But it was the one that showed the rate of recidivism after 1 year was the same between Duluth and active. And I was wondering if you had an idea of why that happened.
Yeah. I have a couple of thoughts on that. So one is, in one study, the DV recidivism rates were so low, remember that was in Iowa, that there was not a difference. It was sort of a floor effect. The other studies, there was a difference. And then we're also obviously looking at not just DV, as we've talked about, but we want all of that to change. And we're finding differences there. The studies that weren't pure randomization were quasi-random, which means that they were still in the same agencies. They were going through the exact same process. It was, whether it was, let's say, Duluth or CBT or active, all of the groups had weekday, weeknight, weekends, where was there an opening, how do schedules work? So we controlled for everything humanly possible because we weren't allowed to come in and place people in their agencies. So I guess I do feel good about those, but you're right, there's a difference there. But the others did find differences. And I think for that one, there was a real floor effect, that the rates were so low of DV within that 1 year, which is why we were interested in looking at 5 years.
Well, folks, we're way behind our agenda, but this is such a worthy subject for good conversation. Dr. Collison and Dr. Lawrence, thank you so much for presenting. And again, congratulations on your data. I think anything that we have to push this forward and to give another quiver, another bow to our quiver, I greatly appreciate it. Dr. Diaz, thank you. And Dr. Gruby, thank you. But have a good day, folks. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us. It was so nice to meet you all.